Hi guys, welcome to Let's Talk Tea podcast with Shani Simon Godfrey. I'm super excited to be here with you all as usual, and I have a big surprise with you all for you all today. We have an amazing speaker, author, doctor of psychologist. She is going to be joining us today, and we are going to be talking about the imposter syndrome. And for those of you that is new to Let's Talk Tea podcast, I am Shani Simon Godfrey, founder of Elevation TV Network, Elevation Radio Network, and The Gifted Magazine, and author of The Five Entrepreneurial Mindset. So we have an amazing episode for you all today. So I am going to bring on Dr. Emee on, and she's going to introduce herself, and we're going to dive on in. Hi, Doctor. Welcome.
Hello, Shani. Hi. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It is great to have you here. Introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Emee Estacio. I'm a chartered psychologist. I'm based here in the UK. I'm actually originally from the Philippines, but I moved here to do my master's and postgrad here in the UK. But I love psychology and I love being here in the UK so much that I stayed here forever. I'm a number one best-selling author of three books, Change Your Life for Good, Imposter Syndrome Remedy, and Fear is Not My Enemy, all available on Amazon in print, Kindle, and book versions.
Awesome. So, tell us about your book. Before we talk about the imposter syndrome, tell us about your book.
Yes. So imposter syndrome remedy actually shares everything that I know in applied psychology that helps people to understand what imposter syndrome is, how it affects them in their life and in their career, and what they can do to remedy it. A lot of people, they may experience a self-doubt and all these feelings of incompetence without really realizing that it is imposter syndrome. So in the book, it actually talks about the characteristics and symptoms of imposter syndrome. How to detect imposter syndrome, and some of the strategies that you can use from applied psychology to overcome these feelings of self-doubt, incompetence, and inadequacy. So that's actually what the book is all about.
Awesome. And it is available on Amazon, guys. So feel free to go and purchase your copy of the book. And imposter syndrome is something that we hear a lot about. It's a lot of blog articles, a lot of different videos and such on imposter syndrome. But we really have to look at it from the clinical standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
We have to look at it
Yes.
from the clinical standpoint. And when you said psychology, I'm like, yes, I knew that I am going to love her because I too have a background in psychology.
Awesome.
So I was
High
like, yes.
five.
I said, this is going to be fun.
We both have the background. That's awesome. Yeah, it's always fantastic to talk to a fellow psychologist because we understand how it works. In terms of how we operate in our cognition and how it manifests in our behavior. So yeah, we can talk about that today.
Yes, awesome. So, what is imposter syndrome? For people that heard about imposter syndrome, but they're not really sure what it is.
Okay. So, yes, imposter syndrome is this persistent feeling of self doubt, incompetence, and inadequacy, despite evidence that shows otherwise. Imposter syndrome has nothing to do with actual fraudsters who are just faking it.
Right.
Imposter syndrome, those who experience imposter syndrome are those people who are actually good at what they do. They know what they are doing. They have the skills, they have the experience, they have the qualifications, and yet they feel as if they are just faking it. They feel as if they are just winging it, and they are concerned. They are actually worried that people will find out that
Right.
they are a fraud. They have this heightened fear and anxiety that sooner or later they're going to make a mistake, or and eventually people will find out that they are incompetent, and people are giving too much value
Yeah.
on what they do. So yeah, so you have this persistent feeling that you're not good enough, this feeling that you're not fit for the job, even if the evidence shows you're actually perfect for what you do.
Right. I'm glad you said that because in my book, I spoke about the five entrepreneurial mindset, and a part of it is the sabotaging mindset. And underneath the sabotaging mindset, I spoke about imposter syndrome. And I do believe that from an entrepreneurial standpoint, that when imposter syndrome show up, that's when a lot of entrepreneurs, they quit their business. That's when they begin to throw in the towel because, like you said, the evidence show that they're doing the right things, that they know what they're doing, but they really don't believe it.
Yes. And it's a real shame because we're losing so much talent, and so much opportunity. When people, as you say, throw in the towel because they are thinking that they are not good enough, or they are doubting their abilities, when in fact they are actually good at what they do. It would be such a loss to just give up just because of that feeling. And most of the time, these are illogical thoughts that have no real basis in the world. So it's really important for people to recognize what are these limiting beliefs. In my book, I call them inner critic messages that fuel these feelings of imposter syndrome, and what you can do, to change that mindset, to change these beliefs, so you can pursue what you want to pursue and really feel confident at what you do.
Right. What are some tips and some tools for that entrepreneur? Because I know that you are a coach as well, and you do coach a lot of professionals. So that professional that is using their gifts and their talent, that feels that they're suffering from that imposter syndrome, what are some things that they can do to help with
Yes.
that?
So the first thing that I will have to say is you have to be aware of your inner critic. All these that voice inside your head that tells you that you're not good enough, that you're not qualified enough, that you are a failure. All these limiting beliefs that you have. Now there are some people who might tell you to destroy that inner critic, to crush your inner critic, or to banish it. I would say, don't do that. Don't hurt
Mhm.
your inner critic, because whether you like it or not, your inner critic is still part of who you are. It may be a hurtful message inside your head, but it is still your head. So what I would encourage your listeners to do is to actually be aware of your inner critic messages, but instead of banishing it or suppressing it or trying to crush it, what you need to do is to explore it. Listen to it, not necessarily follow it, but you need to understand where these messages are coming from, and that you need to give it a bit of TLC. Now, in my book, TLC doesn't really stand for tender loving care. No, you don't. You don't give your inner critic tender loving care. TLC is actually a questioning sequence that you can apply to help you to explore the inner critic message. And TLC stands for: is it true? Is it logical? Is it constructive? So you can follow this TLC questioning sequence to enable you to explore your inner critic messages instead of trying to suppress it. So, for example, if you are telling yourself, I'm not qualified to do this, you have to ask, is it true? Are you
Right.
sure that you're not qualified? Have you checked your resume lately? Haven't you seen all the experience and the qualifications that you've gained through the years to make you fit and qualified for what you do? Because what you'll discover is that when you use the TLC questioning sequence, just by the first question that you ask, is it true? More often than not, you realize that the messages that you hold in your head are actually lies. So you have
Right.
to ask first and foremost, is it true?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So that's the first question. The second question is, you also have to ask, is it logical? Because sometimes the inner critic might be correct. That's why it's important that you have to explore it, because the last thing that you want to do is to be in denial. So for example, you are telling yourself, I'm not good enough to do this yet. Maybe you have done this before, but not enough to be the expert in what you are pursuing. So a lot of entrepreneurs, for example, they may be new in their business. Maybe they're starting a new project and they feel as if they are not good enough yet. to do that. So they ask the question, is it true? And sometimes the answer might be, yeah, maybe you need a little bit more practice, and maybe it's true that you need a little bit more experience. But the second question is it logical? Just because you don't have enough experience yet, or just because you haven't done this for a long, long time, does it mean that you shouldn't do it at all?
Right.
So the logical thing is, if you do something now and you do it over and over and over and over again, with practice and with experience, you will get better at it, right?
Right.
So yes, you ask the first question, is it true? Sometimes it might not be true, sometimes it might be. So move on to the next question. Ask, is it logical? Just because you aren't good at this yet doesn't mean that you'll never be good at it. It doesn't mean that it's going to be like this forever. It's only going to be a matter of time and practice until you get better at it. Which leads you to the third question, is it constructive? Right? So what that question encourages you to do is, if you are thinking, I'm not good enough at this yet, I'm not good to, I don't have enough experience to do this yet. And the second question is it logical? Just because you're not good at this yet doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it at all. The third question is it constructive? What can I do to remedy it? What can I do to get better? So instead of wallowing in self-pity and, feeling sorry for yourself that you're not good at this yet, ask the question, is it constructive? How is it helping you? And what can you do to get better? In that way, your inner critic message is actually trying to help you to grow rather than to stop you at where you are now. So that's why I would encourage your listeners, don't treat your inner critic as if it is your enemy. Actually, that's that's the title of my third book, Fear is Not My Enemy. If you're
Wow.
having these fears or these doubts or all these inner critic messages, treat it like a friend, because it is something that tells you, look, there is a risk involved. You have to be cautious, be careful, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you should stop there. You could explore, assess the risk, assess the consequences of taking action or inaction, assess your abilities, assess what you can do, and from there, make an informed decision on what you need to do next. Make it constructive. So the thought that used to be irrational and illogical and you think that is destructive would actually work for you, because it's triggering you to examine what the risks are, to examine your abilities, and to examine the consequences of your actions, so you can make an informed decision on what you need to do next.
And I think those are some great point. I think those are some great points and some great tactics to use, because I do believe that a lot of times when we are suffering from imposter syndrome, like you said, it's that little voice that we listen to. And sometimes the voice is right, because sometimes we know within ourselves that there's more that we could be doing, and we're not, where we're really underperforming. And when the voice start talking to us, sometimes we do need to examine the voice and say, is it true? Like you said, am I doing the best that I can do? What does my results look like? Look at ourselves on paper and see what we look like. And if it's true, then we may want to do something about it. Maybe we want to, like you said, new entrepreneurs, maybe they want to find a podcast to plug into, or find a video series to watch, or a mentor or a coach or something to get them to the point where they feel like, I am the expert. What do you think about that?
Yes, absolutely. So, for when you have inner critic messages, yes, the first question that you ask is it true? And well, sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not, but don't bury yourself in denial. There are always ways for us to grow. You don't need to be stuck in this belief. You can do something about it. That's basically what I'm trying to share in the book. Because there are some self-help gurus that will tell you, ignore it, and you just have to crush it and suppress it. No, use that inner critic message for your benefit. It's going to enable you to grow, because it's prompting you to explore if you have strengths, if you have limitations, and if there's any areas for growth and development.
Right, right. It's so funny that I had to deal with this. was it, I think around a few days ago,
Mm-hmm.
with a client, and she felt like I'm doing so much and I don't see any results. And I got to the point, here's the imposter syndrome. So I got to the point where I tell the client, I said, you know what I want you to do is I want you to go back and I want you to get a binder, get some sheet protectors, and I want you to print everything that you have done so far. We are what, 6 months? We just started a 6 month in this year. Print everything. Every TV show you went on, every radio show, every magazine, every podcast, every article, every news publication, every press release, print it all, put it in the book. And you can see what you have been working on, because a lot of times we're growing, but we don't necessarily see the growth. And
Absolutely.
right. And that will help us believe that the little guy, the imposter syndrome, the little guy that like to whisper to us is right. So I do believe that's, that's another tool that we can use is like SMART goals, right? Measuring our goals.
Yes, absolutely. And because you can monitor them, and you can look at evidence, rather than it just floating in your mind. In my book, I actually also encourage my readers to keep a catalog of wins.
Hmm.
Because you when you do that, you actually monitor what you've been doing, and what you've been gaining, not necessarily in real numbers, although you can do that as well, but how you are growing in terms of your mindset, in terms of your attitude, in terms of how you feel about what you're doing. All these little wins, you can accumulate. And when that inner critic comes knocking on your door, you can actually have a look at your catalog of wins and see how much you've accomplished, in a given period of time. So that's really important, to be able to monitor your progress, to be able to monitor your wins, and also to be able to celebrate and to
Yes.
acknowledge your wins. Because that's the other thing with people who experience imposter syndrome. Even when they are winning, even if they are getting results, because their expectations are so high that they're not able to appreciate all these little wins that they are accumulating in their journey. So
Right.
it's important to, yes, acknowledge all your little tiny steps, because these will accumulate and lead you to growth, and be able to appreciate, to show gratitude. Because when we express gratitude, what we are grateful for actually magnifies. So these are certain things that I would encourage your listeners to practice. I think, and I think you would agree, it's monitoring, keeping note of your wins, and celebrating and appreciating and showing gratitude for all these accomplishments that you've been gaining. Because for people who experience imposter syndrome, they tend to downplay
Yeah.
what they've achieved. They tend to not really appreciate their value, and not to celebrate their successes. So it's really important to acknowledge it, and to celebrate it if you can.
Yes, I think that's a great tool to add is the celebration, because I think that's one of the things that we don't do enough is to celebrate our wins, especially when it comes to a digital media, digital world, is we have a lot of wins, but we don't really celebrate the wins based on what the media is saying. If we don't have the certain amount of likes or share or hashtags that we thought that we would, then we feel like I didn't really win. But the fact that sometimes we even accomplish that goal, it's a win.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And to be honest, some people, you may have several thousands of followers and stuff, but sometimes you just get one feedback from one
Mhm.
person telling you, oh, your interview was amazing. You wouldn't believe how much it helped me in my mindset, or how much your teachings are helping me in my life. Even just that one person, you having an impact on one single person, it's absolutely amazing. So it's being able to celebrate these wins, and acknowledging what we are giving, the value that we are giving in our work.
Yes, I absolutely believe that, because that, you know what? it's the ones with the thousands of followers that tend to suffer from imposter syndrome, because a lot of times they have thousands of followers, but the numbers, the engagement is not adding up. And that do make them believe like, okay, maybe one day they're going to realize that I'm really not that good, that I
Ah,
really
yes.
don't know. You know, like I probably don't know what I'm talking about. Like maybe one day the world's going to wake up and realize that maybe I'm not that great.
Yeah. Well, if I can share another tip, actually, if the TLC questioning sequence is not working well, it's probably because you are in your head too much. So what I would encourage, if that's going on, if the TLC sequence is not working out, that you're so stuck in your inner critic message, is to actually engage with another person. As you've said, if you have a mentor, or if you have a coach, or even if it's just your partner or a friend, share with them your inner critic messages and go through the TLC sequence with them, because it might, something that you hold as true might not be true for others. You know
Right.
what I mean? So it actually does help when you talk through this with someone else, because some of these inner critic messages, you've been holding on to it for so long. Maybe it's deeply rooted since you were a child. So imagine, if you've been holding on to these thoughts for 20, 30, 40 years, it's not going to change just like that. It might take a little bit of questioning and challenging with another person, to be able to make you realize that some of these messages that you're holding are untrue, illogical, and destructive. So that's actually my second tip. So you can do the TLC questioning sequence yourself, but if it is not working because these are long held, deep seated beliefs, you can actually have another person who can go through the sequence with you, and you may realize that there are certain things, certain thoughts that you hold inside your head that might not necessarily have a factual or logical basis in the real world. So that's actually the second tip that I could share with your audience.
Yes, I think that's an amazing tip. I think that is an amazing tip. And you said something from childhood, and that had me thinking that, a lot of times it comes from our habits. It's the habits of always beating ourselves down, and we carry that over into our professional life, whether it be our jobs or our businesses, because of
Yes.
our habits.
Absolutely. And there are people who experience imposter syndrome who tend to have maladaptive perfectionist tendencies. Maybe when they were a child, it's not good enough unless you get it perfect. You aren't celebrated for the effort, or you're not celebrated for doing a good job. It always has to be perfect. So there are people who experience imposter syndrome who tend to have maladaptive perfectionist tendencies. Now, I have to differentiate between adaptive and maladaptive perfectionism here. Adaptive perfectionists are those people who strive for perfection. They try to hone their skills and, to learn each day to improve their skills until they achieve perfection. That's absolutely fine. It's just coping and improving your skills day by day to achieve perfections. That's okay. But when I talk about maladaptive perfectionism, this is the type of perfectionism that a lot of people with imposter syndrome experience. It's that kind of perfectionism where nothing ever seemed good enough.
Mhm.
So even if you've achieved like huge success, you still wouldn't think that it's good enough. Maybe you've had an interview, for example, with someone, and you stumble in the way, but you've actually got your message across. But you listen back to it, and you notice all these little gaps in the interview, or you're thinking, oh, it's not good enough, when actually it's fantastic.
Right.
Maladaptive perfectionists tend to focus on flaws. They tend to focus on things that didn't go well, rather than appreciating what went well, and magnifying that, and cultivating that, so they can get better and better in the future. Instead of celebrating what they've accomplished, they beat themselves down for the little things, the little mistakes that they've made. So instead of trying to refine their mistakes, sometimes we make mistakes. Instead of trying to improve on that, they would beat themselves up and they would feel as if they are a failure because they make mistakes sometimes. So that's maladaptive perfectionism. And this is something that we need to we need to recognize that, okay, striving for perfection is okay. You take it day by day and refine your craft, improve your skills. But yes, sometimes we can make mistakes, and that's okay as long as we're able to learn and grow from our experience.
Right. How do one reverse that mindset, the maladaptive mindset?
Sorry, what?
How do someone reverse that mindset?
How do you reverse that mindset?
Yes.
Yes, as you know, in psychology, we have this difference between having a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. So, for those listeners who might be experiencing maladaptive perfectionism, they tend to have this fixed mindset that everything is fixed. So, for example, you would say, I'm just bad with numbers. I can't do mathematics. I see numbers, I can't handle it. Well,
Right.
actually, you might not be good at mathematics now. You might not be good with numbers now, but it is something that can be improved. So instead of seeing traits as fixed characteristics that you're not good at this and that's it, you need to adapt a growth mindset, thinking that, okay, you might not be good at this yet, but you still have room for growth. That's how you overcome these maladaptive perfectionist tendencies. If you have a growth mindset, it's recognizing that you are not perfect now and there are areas for improvement, but that's okay because you can actually do certain things that could remedy these gaps. So it allows you to grow and to flourish because you are noticing that there are things that you can still improve. If you are already perfect and if you are not making mistakes anymore, then there's no room for growth anymore.
Right.
So it's being able to recognize that yes, we have flaws and imperfections, but that's okay because there's room for growth and there are certain things, still things that we can still do to improve ourselves.
Right. And I also think that we have to understand that we're not the only one that feels that way. We're not the only one that is going through it. And we don't have to be perfect because I do believe that a lot of times we tend to look at other people and that's when we begin to judge ourselves based on their success, their wins. And
Absolutely.
we have to look at it because the same conversation with the client, I said, let's not measure your success against those people's success because they have been doing this. They have been doing this for plenty of years. You just started. So of course their results and your results won't be the same based on where you are right now. So I think that when we understand that even some people that they look like they have arrived, right? That
Mhm.
they feel that way sometimes.
Absolutely. So, yeah, absolutely right. I've been having these conversations with my clients myself. They would compare themselves with other people who seem like more successful than they are, but they fail to recognize that these people who are far more successful than them have been doing it for like 20 years, or
Wow.
they've been doing it for a long time when they've actually just had like 6 months in the job. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's not a good comparison. And I also say, we apply the TLC technique again. Okay, is it true that they are better than you? Yes. It is true. You see the figures? Yes, it is true that they are better than you. You ask, is it logical? Just because they are better than you, it doesn't mean that you are bad. It just means that you are in a different stage in your career or in
Right.
your business or in your journey compared to them. So it's not the same measure, right? It's illogical to compare these two. So that's the second question, right? Is it logical? The third question is it constructive? How does comparing yourself to them help you in any way? Is there anything that you can learn from them? Is there anything that you can learn from their experience so they have good practice that you can learn from to benefit you. So instead of feeling bad about yourself, that there are people who are achieving huge success, you look up to them, and you feel sorry for yourself. Instead of feeling sorry for yourself, celebrate the people who are actually successful and see what you can learn from them rather than feel jealous about them, because there you can see what is possible, and you can learn from their success and how you can benefit from that.
Right. And you said something, you said it. You said something just now when you said over 20 years. And I thought about it. I said, you know what? That's 20 years of resources that they have. And that's why sometimes they are better. They're better because they have over 20 years and they have a lot of resources that they have to utilize versus someone that just started 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 6 months ago, a month ago. So we have to, one, I think we have to stop comparing ourselves to other people, and that alone will get us on the right path for us to deal with this imposter mindset, this imposter syndrome. What do you think?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And yes, it's okay to actually see these people, what they are achieving. But instead of comparing yourself to them, you don't have to compare yourself to them, because there's no comparison. It's they're in a different stage. What you can do is you can actually learn from their success. What have they been doing that works, and what can you learn from their experience to also benefit you. That's what I would say. Always ask, how can I make this constructive? What can I learn? What can I gain? Instead of feeling sorry for yourself, is there anything that you can learn from other people's successes that could benefit you? That's I think that's a more constructive and productive way to look into this.
And I do agree with you 100% about that. Now, do you
Because you
have,
cannot you cannot avoid this, right? In social
right,
media you see this all the time, how successful people. You cannot avoid it. But instead of feeling jealous, instead of feeling bad about yourself, because you're comparing yourself to them, don't compare yourself. Just learn from them, and celebrate their success. You can see what is possible. You're just at a different stage, but you can see what is possible, when you gain more experience, and when you keep striving, and when you keep when you continue with your journey.
right. That's absolutely true. And the thing about it that we have to understand is nobody posts their losses on social media.
I think that's we should have a campaign on that. I think there was an article in a psychology journal last year or 2 years ago. It's actually a professor who posted his CV of failure, right? So because it's actually to show people that, okay, I'm a world acclaimed professor, but look at all the things that I failed at
Right,
before I got there. It's actually quite empowering. And I guess, this is something that we can also do on social media, if we also share our fails.
right,
It makes us more human, to be perfectly honest with you. We'll see, if this will be a trend at some point. But yeah, I have seen some people who tried that, and it makes them more human, and you could actually relate to them more, because you can see that even if they have failed at some point, they still continue and they still persist, and and that's something that we can learn. But yes, you are right. There are so many other influencers who photoshop their lives. They don't only photoshop their photos, but they also
true.
photoshop their successes, and they
That's
photoshop
true.
their lives like they're living this perfect life. But we need to share our vulnerabilities as well sometimes, some of our fails. Not necessarily moan on social media all the time, but also to share that we are all human, that sometimes we have our vulnerable moments, sometimes we fail. But the important thing is, yes, sometimes we fail, sometimes we make mistakes, but we get up when we're ready, because sometimes it does take a bit of time to find the energy and motivation to get up once again. But when we're ready, we get up, and we continue moving forward.
Right, that is so true. We absolutely just have to keep moving, just keep it pushing. just keep it pushing. Stay focused and keep it pushing. Do you
And
have
yes,
any? Go ahead.
and and one of the things that I would like to share as well, because yes, we have this message, to keep pushing and to keep moving forward. But yeah, we also have to acknowledge that, yeah, sometimes it might be difficult to keep pushing. For one individual, sometimes you've fallen so many times before that when you fall again, it might be difficult to get up. Which is why I would say it's really important that you surround yourself with supportive people. That's actually the essence of my company. It's called the PAMI code. PAMI is a word that means let's go together in Greek. And it basically means that in your journey in this life, we can go together. Because yes, sometimes we fall and sometimes other people will fall. And we have to be there to support each other when that happens. Because yes, sometimes we will fall and we'll pick ourselves up. But there are times when the fall is so bad that it is quite difficult to get up. So it's important to have that support, to surround yourself with people who are compassionate, and to show the same amount of compassion and support to others who may be experiencing the same thing.
That's true. That is so true. And I do love the unique name of your business right away. When I saw it, I was like, wow, what does that mean? But I do, I do love the uniqueness of your business. Like you said,
It's
I
yeah, it is a Greek. Like my husband is Greek, by the way.
know.
So he always says "pame, pame," because I'm, he always drags me. Come on, let's go, let's go. But yeah, it just means let's go together. But I also borrowed the letters of pame, to refer to purpose, action, momentum, and energy. And basically, again, it's a reminder that in our life, we always have to remind ourselves of our purpose, ground ourselves in the why of things, always know why we are doing what we are doing. But at the same time, couple that with action, because if all you have is your intentions, then all you have would be thoughts. I intend to do this, I intend to do that. You have to couple it with action. And when I say action, that would be consistent action. So you maintain the momentum, but also you need to sustain the energy. Keep the positive energy up. Have that support. Experience. You have to practice gratitude, compassion. Feel joy. All of these positive things, so you don't burn yourself out in the process. So it's about having purpose, action, momentum, and energy, and that will help you to drive your success forward.
Yes, I do agree. And I mean, I am so excited and fired up about our conversation because as I'm listening to you, I'm just examining myself. And I thought about it. I said, you know what? Anytime imposter syndrome set in, that's when we limit ourselves. That's when we stop growing our business. We stop collaborating with other people. And that's kind of when we start walking alone. So I love your let's go together.
Yes, yes. You can share your journeys. And for people who experience imposter syndrome, they tend to travel alone. When I mean travel, I mean their life. If they have burdens, if they have problems, they try to hide it. They try to solve it on their own because they fear that if they tell others about it, if they ask for help, it's a sign of weakness, and it is they fear that they will be exposed as frauds if they try to ask for help. But actually asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of humility, that there are certain things that you're good at and there are certain things that you need help with. And when you need help, ask for help. Reach out for support. And if someone else also asks for your help, see what you can do to support them as well. So it's a give and take relationship. But in this journey, we can actually go together. And if you are experiencing imposter syndrome, thinking that I cannot admit that I cannot do this on my own, I cannot admit that I need help, probably you do need help and you're in denial, and that's just gonna make things harder for you. So if you're listening to this, and if you can relate to that, if you're someone who's not seeking help, because you are afraid that people are going to judge you, and you are afraid that you will be exposed as a fraud for asking for help. Try to remember that you are human, and there are certain things that you're good at, and there are certain things that you might need help with, and just acknowledge that, and trust that there will be people who will help you if you just ask for it. You need to ask for it.
Awesome. Any final thoughts before we go, Doc?
Any final thoughts? Well, for those listeners who are experiencing imposter syndrome, don't worry. You're not the only one who experiences this. About 70% of us will experience imposter syndrome at some point in our lives. And in my book, I actually call it imposter syndrome remedy rather than imposter syndrome cure, because self-doubt, this feeling of incompetence, this feeling that you're not good enough will always be there whenever you have a new project, or whenever you have something that's new that you haven't done before. You will always stop and think, oh, I'm not sure if I can do this, or I'm not sure if I'm not good enough. That's okay. We all feel this way. But the important thing is, when you feel this way, that you know how to manage it, that you know how you're going to handle it, to assess your abilities, to assess the risk, to assess the consequences of your action or inaction, and make an informed decision on what you need to do next. Don't get stuck in the thought that you're not good enough, or the thought that you are a failure. Don't get stuck in your head. Try to move forward. Use the TLC questioning technique, as I've shared with you today, and use that so you can flourish with confidence at work and in life.
Thank you so much, Doc. Guys, I am super excited to have her on with us. We had an amazing conversation, and I know that your life is changing as we know it, as we begin to implement these tragedies and resources that we discussed today. Thank you guys so much for joining Let's Talk Tea podcast, and we'll catch you on your timeline. Bye, guys.
Awesome.